welcome to join in.
Yeah.
It'll be like a reunion.
Yeah. A callback.
Yeah.
Well, see, Joe Rogan does a lot of that, where he's like, got 2 or 3 people in the room and stuff. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. I joke that I want to be like a female, feminine Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that. Like, I don't see a mirror of that in the podcasting world.
There's a few, but none that I can really think of. I mean, there's plenty of, I don't know, I've got plenty of men that I listen to, and maybe that's just personal preference or just what's found me anyway. Yeah. Yeah, always need more ideas out there, more charismatic people leading the way, bringing ideas together. Yeah.
And I'm excited. Oh, gosh, Brett, I get so... One of my biggest practices is being patient with the process.
You mean this process, or like the universe bringing to you the...
All of it.
Okay.
All of it. Definitely including the podcast. Because I can see the vision. I can see 1 step down the road, 2 steps down the road, 5 steps down the road, 10 steps down the road.
Right, yeah.
And because I used to live much more in vision than in the present moment and taking action, I realized how detrimental that can be to actually manifesting the vision, right?
Yeah, you're always in the vision, you're not there yet, you're beating yourself up because you're not there yet, and you're not just saying, okay, what's the first step? Yeah. That's what I would do, yeah.
This is what it is.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, I'm still here in this house, and it's a beautiful house, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
But it's like, I have a bigger vision for myself, and there's that constant comparison and that taste of the art versus what I want it to be versus what I have. Yeah, it's a very interesting feeling. Yeah,
I feel a lot of similarity between us.
I didn't know you're in transport. That's a weird connection.
Weird connection, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not anymore, but it was a... Although there are still days when the lack mentality, scarcity mindset pops up. That's usually how it pops up these days is, oh, we don't have as many sessions scheduled for this month yet as we want. Should we just be going out and Uber driving?
Right?
Like whatever it is. The transportation industry was a really solid fallback when I, for whatever reason, wasn't engaging with my passions, or just at the points where I wasn't making enough money doing what I wanted to do to support myself and, get my needs met, right? Yeah. And a lot of that was Uber driving, food delivery, DoorDash, but I also did contract work usually for like auto companies, so moving around car parts. I managed a contract with Napa for a while in St. Louis, so coordinated with all the Napa stores to get their parts where they needed to go, because the customer in St. Charles wants this part, and St. Charles store doesn't have it, but Arnold store has it, so that's on a different route. So what, route does it need to get sent out on in order to meet up with the other driver that will take it to St. Charles?
Yeah. Are you motivated by efficiency?
So much.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
That same thing. It's like, we could have done that better.
Yeah, so much.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't get that done today. Or that's not there. I need to, and I play a lot of board games as well, and a lot of things are in my life like, no, I can be more efficient. I could have made a bit more money, could have had more fun, and I could have got that part from that Napa store to the other one.
Yeah.
And I was like, if only,
So good. Oh my gosh, yes. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
When Cassandra was like, I think you'd really like having Brett on. It was just an easy decision, even knowing, right? Like almost nothing about you. I felt so much resonance and ease with us during our first interaction. I was like, there's got to be something there
that's right,
that we can talk about.
Well, that's good, because you don't, if you're thinking, well, what do we talk about? And then you write the script, it's like, that's not how good art is created. Good art is created in the moment, for sure. Yeah.
And now I know that you've done some acting.
Yes. So I did. That was my sort of dream career from about grade 9 or 10, was to get into the film industry as a stunt performer. So I've done more stunts than acting, but I've done a little bit of acting as well. And
I'm a big theater person. That was like my life in middle school and high school. I was just in a show early 2023 for the first time in 10 years. And I mean, talk about a Kundalini awakening. I mean, it was just, and not that was my initial awakening, but such a charge. I mean, I get so charged from performing.
Yeah.
And the podcast is a moderate, right, way of keeping that alive.
Yeah, I see that with a lot of people. I think the most obvious way for people like us who want to be a conduit or a mirror or a reflector or whatever for other people, an amplifier, is they want to go into film, but now a lot of people are drawn to TikTok or YouTube because that's right in front of them, you know, but the avenues for that expression could be so many different ways, you know, whether it's conveying inspiration or ideas or whatever, different stories. There's a lot of different avenues, and we have to keep digging for that congruent spot, because theatre might be what's right in front of you as a kid, or stunts, because I watched a lot of action movies as a kid, but now I've learned to or I'm realizing it's not about inspiring others that I want to do. I want to progress to more education. It's like, okay, how can I be a walking aha moment for other people?
So
you know,
good.
it's like just walk up and just touch someone, and they just have a revelation.
Yes.
You know, and not to tell them that they're doing anything wrong, because it's not about that. It's not about ego or I'm doing it better or anything. But how can I be just able to get someone to go and just raise to the next level, to see something bigger and better of themselves or the world, or just have more peace so they're not stuck focused on something.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It's awesome.
It's so good. So yummy.
Yeah.
For all those who are listening, welcome back to the Naturally Rosie podcast. My name's Rose. I'm sitting here with Brett Solomano. Solomano.
Don't overthink it. You just got to say it. A lot of people they read it twice, and I just go. You got it. Yeah.
It really is. It looks exactly like it sounds.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But then people think maybe there's an extra letter in there. It gets misspelled all the time, but that's what happens when you got a unique name. So I think there's still only one of me. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few Brett Solomons and a few other names like that, Brents and different variations, but still the only one. So
nice.
Easy to find. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to dive right in. Will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, we have a lot of things to talk about today. We were just chatting just now, and a lot of overlap. Yeah. So. My name's Brett Solomano, and for about 15 years I've been doing stunts off and on in TV shows and film. You can probably tell that I've got an accent, so I wasn't born in the US. I'm a very long way from home right now. Born in Melbourne, but grew up in a small country town a few hours north.
Australia.
Yeah, in Australia, that's right.
For those of you who are like Melbourne, Australia, not Melbourne, Florida. So looking outside right now, I see all the snow, and there isn't really any towns or cities in Australia where it's like you can just have snow land on your front doorstep. We didn't really have a white Christmas. Obviously the seasons are inverted, so this time of year, if I look outside, it'd be brown grass and everything's dead because everything's dry and probably droughts going on. The sky might even be brown because of bushfires. Bushfires were very common in Australia. So a very different experience right now, making sure that I leave the house with a beanie and gloves and extra layers and stuff like that. But yeah, I always felt like I was very bored in growing up in a country town. But, you know, the stimulation is wherever you make it. And as I was often told, a boring person is someone who gets bored, you know. So you got to make your own stimulation, and we did that with making our own movies and watching movies and playing computer games. So I was always kind of living in a bit of a fantasy land in a good way, you know.
And that led me to having a career in the film industry as a stunt performer. Did that for about 5 years in Australia in my early 20s. And then sort of took a break for a bit and started working with disadvantaged youth and doing some other stuff like that. Disadvantaged youth.
What
that's
populations?
that's sort of the general catch-all term. There was a lot of youth that I worked with that had they didn't quite fit in with school. They had hyperactivity. They had different mental abilities. That was school is a big catch-all for a lot of kids, and kids with special abilities or special needs don't really fit into those spots. So I worked with a number of different camps and schools and that sort of thing, but one of them was we would have these 1 hour sessions broken up into 15 minutes, and 15 minutes might be on the rock climbing wall, 15 minutes might be on the trampolines. We do 15 minutes of games, and we were just trying to do anything to get their mind and body active in unique ways that would speak to them more than the sit down, shut up type of schooling that is often put on kids these days, So there's a number of different formats that we were that I was looking into, and just naturally found a lot of these opportunities. And then I got the opportunity to move to the US. My green card came through. I always wanted to move to the US, move to Hollywood. And that's probably the biggest thing I've ever wanted in my life, was an opportunity to move to the US. And it was just a lottery system that they had going back then. I don't know if it's still around now, but I got my permanent resident card and was packed up and gone within 5 months and said, I'm gone. Yeah. So
was that motivated solely because of Hollywood? You wanted to be where Hollywood was? Yeah,
it was, in Australia, the film industry is a lot smaller. There aren't very many big films that are made in Australia that are Australian funded. The market's just a lot smaller. They do a lot of small independent films. They're very particular to Australian needs and tastes and humour. But every couple of years, when the Aussie dollar is correct or suitable to the US market, the big American films will come over. The first Matrix was filmed in Sydney. Right before I started, one of the Superman films was filmed over there. Mad Max, obviously that has a big tie to Australia because of George Miller, the director. But a lot of the big money will come when the economy's right and that sort of thing. So you're kind of waiting for this to be chosen, basically. Apart from that, it's just TV shows and small things. And so a lot of performers in Australia or in crew members and that sort of thing do aspire to get bigger opportunities in the US. There's more money, there's a bigger market, so you can kind of there's more people in the film industry, and there's also more opportunities. So it's still even, but you can kind of fit in a bit more easier because there's a bigger pond to step into. It's a bigger lake, So yeah, and being that there's more money, there's often more creativity, and you can just fall in where you fit in, basically. So that was sort of offered to me as a suggestion back when I was in Australia, and put in my green card application, then took a few years off to go work with kids, and was like, well, hang on a second. I don't want to work in the film industry anymore because I'd sort of taken a break, and something else was speaking to me around education and inspiring people in a more direct way rather than through the art form of film and TV. But then I had this weird serendipitous moment where my old school teacher, his brother-in-law, is the executive producer of one of the largest TV shows. So very random connection internationally. Here I am in a small country town, and he's got a connection to like the top spot. And it's not just like a friend of a friend, it's like his brother-in-law. So within a couple of months, I was sort of having lunch with him because he's like, yeah, come and hang out. Because I think he was in the big spot, but he didn't need it. You could tell he was still very humble from a country town kind of near where I grew up as well. And so he wanted to give other people that opportunity. And I got to hang out with him, and he basically gave me a golden ticket to get into stunts as well. So that was sort of weird, like, here is this opportunity to get back into the film industry. I thought, well, I better take it. I think the universe wants me to do something here with this. And I tend to sort of listen to that. When something's hard, maybe I should push it. and maybe I shouldn't, maybe now's not the right time. But then suddenly when doors open up, you should listen to that resistance or ease with which things can come to you. So I did stunts in the US now for a few more years, moved to Atlanta, and the film industry has been pretty strong there for the past 10 or so years, I guess. Yeah. That's just due to the tax credits that have come in to bolster that. There's a few different ways that the states and the governments can incentivize different groups of people to move around, of course, and different industries to flourish, and that's one of the things that Georgia chose to do and has kept quite strongly for the last 10 years. So it's been pretty big. It's been a bit quieter, though, again, in the last couple of years, so I've had to step into other things for income, but also I realize now is a good time to look deeper at what it is that I want to be doing with my life, which is inspiring and educating and doing that in a more direct way. So my coaching has picked up more recently, my public speaking's picked up more recently. I'm still doing work with trucking because that was a sub layer to the film work I was doing, and we can talk more about that. But you're probably seeing, you're trying to draw a mind map, I can see with your eyes right now, like what is this? What are all these pieces here? But all the pieces seem to link up for me in a very unique way. This job that I've had recently, more or less part-time, is the first salaried job I've ever had, because I would always just dip and dive into other things, get money when I needed to. I was always very resourceful and connective. But I'd always keep looking for the next thing. This thing could lead to this other thing, and I'd want to keep building myself more and making more of myself and having a bigger impact in the world. Yeah.
Did you? Okay, yeah, it is really, it's so interesting to me. It makes sense that you learned to drive a big rig, an 18-wheeler for being a stunt double. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, so
they actually put you through CDL.
Well,
training and certification?
They didn't. The proverbial they. I mean, who is they? It's a very self-driven.
The people hiring you for.
Yeah, so
movies?
It's very, very self-governed in that.
You became more of an asset for being a stunt double, because you went out and learned how to drive.
Yes.
An 18-wheeler.
Yeah, so there's a few different avenues that you can show up as a stunt performer. One is because you're very talented and very specifically skilled, and you're that guy that can do that very specific stunt. Or it could be that you're quite gifted and multi-talented in lots of different things, like firearms, driving. Maybe you can say a couple of lines. So you might play that thug who gets beaten up, falls over, says a line, jumps in the car, and then gives chase, Rather than having 3 or 4 different performers, they'll kind of get that guy who's pretty good. He may not be the world's best, but he can deliver a line, get the job done, and then do a burnout in the car as it gives chase or something like that, And then the other alternative, or the other reason you might get hired, is because you look like the actor. And so me being 6'2" and quite thin, I've doubled a lot of older guys. I doubled Jeffrey Dean Morgan for a couple of seasons on The Walking Dead. Dennis Quaid, Joshua Jackson.
I know who that is. A thing about me, Brett, is I am almost illiterate when it comes to film, as in actors, actresses. Don't know names. But I know who Dennis Quaid is, so that's one of the first names you've said. I've been like, I know who that is.
It's always tough when people say, "Oh, you're in stunts."
And you do totally, I can see that. I'm like, oh yeah, of course he could. Yeah, of course he could double.
That's right. Yeah. So it's always tough when people ask me, like, what TV shows have you been in? What actors have you worked with? Because I'll be like, oh, I've worked on The Walking Dead. You must know that. And they're like, no, I don't know that. And then there's some obscure.
I know the show.
Right.
I don't know the actor.
Yeah, it's everyone's got their art that they like, and I don't try and go out there and say, oh, I'm a big deal, you must know who I am, or I know this actor, he's a big deal, you must know that, because everyone's in it for different reasons, and I've always found it interesting. Yeah, I tell some people I worked on The Walking Dead, and they freak out, and other people I tell them. And again, I'm not trying to get a reaction, but I'm trying to give them something because they've asked. But then they'll look up my work on IMDb and they're like, why didn't you tell me you're on this little show? And I'm like, oh, that show. And there's this tiny little crime reenactment show that I did one episode on or something and haven't given 2 thoughts about. But then that's
for them, it's their thing.
That's their show,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So it's interesting just hearing what people are attracted to and gravitate towards. And so, yeah, for me, I tried to be a little bit of an all-rounder. I was really fascinated by learning. And so for me, it's this opportunity to learn all these different skills. How can I perform as a military soldier or a thug with a gun? Because there's two different styles of using a weapon there. Or martial arts. There's a lot of different stories you can tell through fighting, whether it's someone who's attacked and they're fighting for their life, or they're much more of a precise, well-trained soldier again, or a martial artist or something. There's very different styles. And so what I leaned into that a little bit, but for some reason driving really spoke to me.
Cool.
And one of my mentors, who was really amazing to me at the time, he'd done a lot of different work on TV shows and movies in Australia. He said, you know, it's much better to get paid to practice, because driving's very expensive, especially when you're tearing tires up and breaking things because you're going through the corner too fast or whatever. It's better to practice in somebody else's vehicle. Now, with that said, people say, well, do you stunt drive when you're driving on the roads? Not usually, because you're trying to, sometimes the best skill comes from the simplest things. So even pulling up to a stop line, or trying to maintain my speed perfectly at the speed limit. Not like, oh, well, it's fine, 5 miles an hour over under, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm trying to be really precise. And that's the level of professionalism and specificity I'm going for, is like, okay, how can I be more specific, you know? Because I think every skill that you have, to be the best, you have to be very specific. You know, are you going for a walk, or are you truly tuning in with your body, giving it exactly what it needs? You know, something like meditation, which I know you do quite a lot of as well. When you're breathing, are you breathing just naturally, or are you deliberately choosing every breath? Yeah. So that level of fascination carried me through a lot of skills, but specifically driving. And I drove a lot of buses and trucks, and I drove double trailers in Australia and double-decker buses for weddings and party tours and all sorts of things like that. I've been a driving instructor teaching drift driving, like drift racing, you know, a little bit of rally driving, and also CDL driving here in the US as well. And that's another way to learn, is to pull yourself out of it as well and see the challenge or the growth in someone and their programs that they're trying to run while they learn a new skill. And that's another whole meta experience to have of a skill, is to then be teaching it or writing about it as well. So that level of interest carried me to a Guinness World Record, which I still have, thankfully, for the longest distance reversing a tractor trailer. And that was done 4.5 years ago in a parking lot in Atlanta. We had a 53-foot trailer, big rig, and I reversed 55 and a third miles in about 4 hours. So I was reversing
55 miles?
Yeah, 55 and a third. And 3.34, because that's what it says on the certificate.
What?
So I was going around, the lap that we had around this parking lot that we'd created was like a third of a mile. I'm doing about 14 miles an hour in reverse, and just kept that going for 4 hours. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yeah.
Why?
At some point, when you're really fascinated by something, you just keep saying, what's next? And then I remember we were on the yard when I was teaching truck driving at the truck school. And as you do, a couple of men get together. We got a couple of instructors and a couple of students, and there's a few good students in there as well. And they want the next challenge, so we keep raising the bar. And we have these exercises, or these yard skills they have to perform to get their test. And we're demonstrating that, and most of the students are doing it quite easily. So we start showing off. Okay, can you do it faster? Can you do it in one go? Because when you do the test, you're allowed to pull up a couple of times and correct yourself. But okay, the next level is, instead of pulling up twice, can you pull up once or no times? How quickly can you get in the box now? So we're showing off, and a truck has high range and low range, which means most trucks that have a gear shift for these big rigs, right? They will have several gears in low range, and then you flick a switch, and then you go back through those same gears again, but now you're at highway speed, so you got low and high range. Fun fact, you can do that in reverse as well. So now you can go up to 25 miles an hour in reverse. Oh my gosh. If you can control the vehicle.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that's the level we were sort of playing to. And again, it's like, all right, I did it in this small environment, and I think I got up to like, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, but like, okay, how fast can I actually go here? So I took the trailer off, I think, and then I'm reversing this thing and got up to 25 miles an hour in reverse. And I thought, I gotta put the trailer on here. And then so again, it's like, okay, wonder what the record is, because I could achieve a pretty quick distance here. And initially we were going to do it around the school, but there just wasn't quite enough room. And yeah, stupidly, when you get onto something, as you know, you start getting creative and it doesn't let you sleep at night. You start thinking and you go to the next level. And so we found this parking lot 5 minutes south of Atlanta, and just set it all up and got the surveyor to come out and measure it, because that was a requirement of Guinness World Records organization. And practiced a little bit beforehand, but you can't really practice something that's going to take 4 hours. I mean, you can practice for half an hour, and it's not a physical skill at that point. If you can drive 10 laps, you can probably drive 150, but it's a mental game of focus, And for me, the biggest challenge, I knew at some point my mind was going to slip, I was going to get tired, and driving it, I mean, I say it was an average of 14, but on the straight I was getting up to 20, 22 miles an hour in reverse. So if the road or the parking lot's also like undulating over these hills, right? So the truck is leaning left and right, and I'm chasing it the whole way, chasing this trailer to try and keep right behind it. So, okay, at some point, I know I'm going to lose it. And that's one of the reasons why I stopped. The previous record was 39 miles. And I thought, I'm going to keep pushing it now just to see where it goes. And then I just started to lose it a couple of times, and I thought, okay, my brain's getting tired, and that's time to stop. And so being very interested in personal development and self-development, there's a physical skill there of driving and performing, but I was very, very fascinated with this idea of like awareness. How aware am I right now? And how do I know that I'm aware right now? Like, how do you know when you fall asleep? How do you know? Do you remember falling asleep ever?
Sometimes. Yeah, but not most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time. It's a very, I mean, you're talking about lucid dreaming and that sort of stuff. There's a way to learn to sort of catch yourself in that moment. But most people don't get that opportunity. They try and stay awake, and then the next thing they know, they're waking up,
I find that I remember best the moments of actually falling asleep when I am being most present with the process. So when I go into a meditative, a mindfulness practice before bed, and I'm just being present with my breath, and then I'm aware of my eyelid closed and then opened slowly, and it's doing that again, and it's done okay now a few times, and then the drift off. And
I love that, because that to me is exciting to hear, because there's a very I can see you demonstrating it there, you're talking about it, there's a lot of detail in that awareness. It wasn't just like, I fell asleep and then I woke up, And to use another vehicle metaphor, it's like, I don't know, my fuel tank was full and then it was empty. I don't know what happened. But there are little details along the way, increments of going to 3/4 of a tank, half a tank, etc. And you go through that minutiae of detail. And I was catching myself with this truck reversing. I know my accuracy was deteriorating, and I had these little points along the track that I had to hit. Again, to keep myself focused, keep myself very specific. It wasn't just laps, it was specific points around this whole track, and I kept missing more of those marks. And
you were tracking that trajectory.
Yeah, those what they call cornering lines. I knew that because I'm reversing this 53-foot trailer around this parking lot, and it's quite large. It's a large parking lot, but at the same time, there's not much margin for error. And also reversing as well, there's only so many ways you can corner that vehicle to get it around, so I have to be very precise. And I'm watching myself getting less and less accurate and trying harder to be more accurate, but then realizing, okay, it's time to switch off. So that happened to be ironically right on the 4-hour mark, and I'd blown the record out of the water by that point and was quite happy and submitted the paperwork, and they didn't challenge it because I sent them 13 hours worth of camera angles and things like that, because we were filming it with these static GoPros and things because they needed video footage, and I was freaking out that one of the cameras might run out of battery or whatever, so sent them all this footage, and I don't know if they looked through all 13 hours, but I think they probably just put a stamp on it.
Please, no, we don't want to watch this anymore. Here's your certificate.
That's right. They probably scanned through it, just rolling through the timeline. Yeah, close enough. Yeah. So I don't know.
Whoa.
But yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. And yeah, little things like that just really fascinate me. I'm fascinated by human potential and self-awareness, and where else can this thing go, this little program that I've created for myself. So
how did you get into that? What was your inspiration to start your self-actualization journey in a conscious way?
I think it was when I first moved to Melbourne and I was getting into the film industry. I think we went along to a couple of personal development seminars or something like that. And I don't know if I remember really consciously thinking this, but growing up in a small country town, there was just all of the blue collar people living in this country town and a few white collar people. And that's the world, and we'd go to Melbourne, we'd drive 3 hours to visit family and whatever else. And, I thankfully had traveled quite a bit as a kid because my parents loved traveling, but there always just seemed to be more, okay, what else can I see? What else can I do? What else can I become? And these personal development seminars seem to give permission, not just and to some extent, once you're a country person, you're always a country person, because that's how you grow up and that's who you are at your core potentially. But I always felt like there was something more. And not that anything was ever really wrong or bad about how I grew up, but just there was something else that was speaking to me. So these personal development seminars that I went to, they seemed to give permission for that. And the more I leaned into that, the more I was able to take on other people's skills of learning how to have more money, learning how to be more social and go through the, the 7 areas of life, let's say, and develop each of those to a point where I could have my own flow. Yeah.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
I also grew up in a very tiny country town. How big was the town you grew up in?
I think when I was first there in the early 90s, it was like 1,500 people. But we were on the border of 2 states, and there was a river that divided the state lines.
Well, that sounds lovely.
Yeah. It was so we had this lake and everything like that, but then we'd go across the state line every day to go shopping. So the other town across the river had, I think, maybe 4,000 originally, but I think it's grown. The smaller town, Mulwala, where I grew up, is probably 2,500 people now, I think.
Okay.
Probably 2.5. And then Yarrawonga on the other side is like, I think that's probably several thousand, maybe 6,000 or 7,000, something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, pretty small.
Pretty small, yeah.
Especially just counting the town you actually lived in.
That's
where
right.
your
yeah.
address was. Yeah.
It was a big deal when we got our first traffic light.
Yeah.
And Subway came right before I left, and KFC. Back in the 90s, the McDonald's and KFC was super cool as a kid, right? And
oh yeah, that's what I got after my doctor's appointments. Was I got to go to McDonald's and get chicken nuggets.
That's right, chicken nuggets are a Happy
an
Meal.
Ice cream cone. Yes, a Happy Meal, definitely.
Yeah. I remember. Growing up in a small country town, it was a big deal. Once a month, we'd go an hour to one of the bigger cities, maybe 100,000 people, and we'd go to the movies, the theater, and we'd have McDonald's with a Happy Meal and all that kind of stuff. So. Or going to Melbourne, and the grandparents would take us out to a movie and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a big deal when KFC and McDonald's came to town. But by that time, I was I don't think I was as fascinated by it. I think I'd shifted to other means of taking on food. I just didn't have that novelty as much. But yeah, still there now. The KFC and McDonald's are still there now, and it's gotten a lot bigger though. Being on a river, it's quite popular for a lot of people, and a lot of people go there to retire and stuff. Yeah.
I was just in the town I grew up in when we went to. Cassandra didn't go, but a few of us went to the Austin Tantra Festival.
Oh, nice! Yeah.
In early December.
Uh-huh.
And Austin is an hour away from where I grew up.
What's the name of your town?
Texas, Lexington.
Okay. Cool.
Lexington, Texas, yeah. Population sign still has always said, as far back as I can remember, 1,177.
Oh, yeah.
So,
how do they keep the population exactly at 1,177?
Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it just mattered, like the survey, the census mattered so little. They're like, we're not even gonna check.
That's right. Yeah, this has been pretty close.
There's not a McDonald's there or a KFC.
Okay,
like,
you haven't gotten to that level
yet. The
yet.
Dollar General is still the grocery store.
Yeah.
Okay, tiny.
Yeah.
There is one traffic light that's always, maybe, I mean, I was probably less than 5, like around 5 when they installed this light, but it's never gotten to be an actual light. It's still just the blinking yellow light.
Yeah,
that
it's
lets
like,
people know
I'm here just in case. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Guys, remember, yeah.
And when I was 12, one of my dad's good friends from grad school who lived in St. Louis, outside of St. Louis, worked in St. Louis, called my dad and said, hey, my company is hiring. I think you'd be really good for the position. Let me make the connection for you. And my dad was hesitant, but I, and later I found out my mom, were both really excited. We were like, please apply for this job. and looking back, it's always been apparent to me how, like, it's just an abnormal thing for a 12, 13-year-old, typically, I think, to be excited about moving to a different state.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't have articulated it at the time, but the feeling was very much, I'm a big fish in a small pond. I've already played out what my life is going to be like if we stay in Lexington, Texas for the rest of my life. I want to know what else is out there.
Yeah.
And like you, was engrossed. For me, it was books, engrossed in fantasy books. That's all I did, was read fantasy. So there was very much the sense of adventure and what's on the horizon and magic and where's the magic.
Yeah.
And Wallet town I grew up in was lovely, very quaint, very safe, right? All those things, very comfortable, but not adventurous.
Yeah.
Not exciting, not particularly stimulating.
Yeah.
So I was, like similar to what I'm hearing in your story, very excited to expand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a thing I've noticed where a lot of people would leave. And there's a number of country towns, because I went to school in the next town over, because that was big enough to have high schools and stuff. And people would either move to either Melbourne or Sydney in Australia if they were going to move away, or they would possibly stay there, and there's other options, of course, but that seemed to be the majority.
They were either content with the country life or they wanted more.
Yeah, they would maybe go to university and come back, or they'd go to university and stay there. They'd move elsewhere. And I think a few of us moved overseas, but I'm sort of one of the few ones that did that, I think. Although, again, I haven't really kept in touch with many people back in the town, but, see them on Facebook every now and again and that sort of thing. When I go on, I don't go on Facebook too much anymore. I think I made the decision a little while ago to be more of a producer than a consumer in some regards, and that's coming back to the personal development conversation. It's being able to analyze everything you do and say, is this the value I want to create for myself and for other people? And thankfully, I've never really been addicted to much in my life, but social media was one of those ones that would really get under my skin, and I'd end up losing a couple of hours and not feel good afterwards, So yeah, I decided to take a break from it and get off. And people think I've disappeared and whatever else sometimes. I haven't heard from you in a little while. It's like, well, you know, you can reach out to me, or we can actually call each other or knock on our front doors like we used to do. But, you know, everything's on social media. So there's two sides to that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I only have social media for business.
Yeah.
I've been off and on Facebook specifically, Instagram to some degree, and those are the only social medias I have.
Yeah.
Many times, and about 2 years ago when I decided to go back on, I'm going back on and I'm using it as an outlet for sharing content and to connect with people directly, one-on-one, to the degree that like is aligned, and basically if they reach out.
Yeah.
So there's very little, and I still will catch myself. There's still some self-discipline to employ to prevent like the habit from being recreated, right? Of like reading through comments and like how many people liked this, etc.
And I'm just gonna get. My friend sent me this link that I need to look at. It's just one thing, and then 15 minutes later, you're like, God damn it, get off. Like, oh, I hate myself right now. You got me, Facebook.
I'd been so solid like in my relationship with social media, and then 2 weeks ago, I was on a podcast called Jew from the Lou with a new friend, and we did this interview, and I posted it and came out in an even more public way about having spent some years doing sex work, and most of the reaction that I got on social media was very positive, but not all of it. And I put my phone down, I put it down for a day, and I didn't get on social media for at least 2 days, and was just processing all these emotions of, oh, right, this is what it's like.
Yeah.
And to circle back to your point about being a producer and not a consumer, that's the lane that I aim to stay in with social media. Is I'm on here to share. Yeah. I'm not even on here to get feedback about what I share. I'm on here just to share.
Yeah.
And I trust that whatever the response and or reaction is to what I share, it's gonna happen whether or not I'm aware of it or not.
Yeah. It's a delicate balance as a creator and a producer, right? Because you have this vision and you're like, yeah, this is what I'm building and creating. This is my output that I want to influence the world with. But at some point, you kind of need to listen to your audience to say, okay, what are they getting? What are they actually receiving from this? But then you listen too much, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm trying to please everyone again, and it's a very delicate balance. Yeah.
Well, and yes, I'm very open to feedback from people who subscribe to my Substack, and those can be free subscriptions or paid subscriptions, and that place I'm very open to feedback in whether that's comments or direct messages, because to me that says, oh, you've invested in my content.
Yeah.
Right. There's some commitment. The draw between us is strong enough that you've made, a relatively simple investment of clicking subscribe.
Yeah.
Right. To continue to keep up with me.
For sure.
And at that point, I'm interested in your feedback and investing in you in a real way.
That's right. Yeah. It's kind of like, asking your parents or your friends for advice. It's like, do they have the same vision for me? Should I be taking on what they have to say? Your parents, they love you, but are they are they just going to tell you that you're beautiful and they love you no matter what? Or are they going to try and push you into something else? And same with your friends.
Or they could be like my parents, who I love very much, but they just don't give any feedback, man.
They don't.
They don't. Like I tell them things, and they're like, "Okay, great." I'm like, what?
Can you hate me for a little bit? Can you make me feel something here?
Anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way that they best know how to love, is we're just going to be neutral.
Yeah.
You know, and
That's,
honestly, that's
a beautifully,
that's pretty good.
It's a beautifully tough thing, you know, especially as a child. I'm sure you were hoping for a bit more reflection back, perhaps. I imagine. Yeah, I know. Yeah, again, it's about being deliberate, right? What are we actually trying to get here? And I think about, you know, driving quite a bit. I'm fascinated by human psychology as expressed through driving, because I've spent so much time on the road. And I think how we become as drivers with our behavior is exactly how we appear in the comments on social media, because we're just like, oh, this is stupid, or we make a joke or some sarcastic thing. It's like, that's not how we respond socially one-on-one with people. But when we're driving, someone maybe cuts us off and all of a sudden we're angry. And it's like, that's kind of weird, you know, how we react so quickly in an unfiltered way to people interacting on the roads or on the social media comments. It's there's some kind of lack of filter there, which is absolutely fascinating to me. Yeah.
The latest thing that I've been using as a reflection for how am I navigating my space is chess.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I hadn't played in years. Brandon hadn't played in years. We're flying back from Maui. The internet on the plane isn't working, so our other and we had both read our books, right? So
right.
What could we do? Well, I have a chess game on my computer that doesn't require internet, so we start playing chess. And it was so good. Right away, we were both like, oh, this is awesome. I haven't played in so long. I love that you love doing this with me, right? And almost immediately I found myself noticing what are the themes in how he's playing, and what are the themes in how I'm playing, and what can I learn here about how I'm playing in how it's both effective and ineffective. That is probably a reflection on the larger themes and trends in my life.
Yeah. Chess is a beautiful metaphor. Yeah. I play a lot of board games myself as well for similar reasons. I think they're a great way to be social. For a couple of hours, you can set something up, you can trash talk each other, you can celebrate, you can commiserate. But again, as that famous video on YouTube goes, at the end of the game, it all goes back in the box, you know. And there's a lot of life skills that can be learnt from board games, and I love the insight and the depth to which you're looking at character observations through chess and how people are playing and the strategies and how they're being aggressive or defensive or not, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that's super cool. Yeah.
So I want to know more about your transition to coaching and public speaking. And what do you focus on?
What do I focus on?
Yeah, who's your ideal client, or what do you feel most called to? Yeah, if there's an area of focus for you in your coaching or public speaking.
Sure. I think starting, as I mentioned before, starting with the core theme that it's taken me a while to unpack. Again, you know, I'm being called to watch movies and play computer games as a kid and that sort of thing. You know, what is all that about? I think a lot of people have different currencies. You know, it's kind of like your love language is buried under the surface. What motivates you to get up in the morning? What's the core driver of your voids and values to move you through life? Keep going.
Yeah, you're good.
What's your core voids and values to move you through life? And, you know, some people it's about kindness and making people smile or getting people energized, whatever it might be. I think my core currency that I'm fascinated by is like aha moments. When somebody lights up after they see something differently, they learn something about themselves, they see the world differently. To me, that's magic, you know. And initially it was, you know, I liked doing magic tricks as a kid and that sort of thing, and then doing stunts. But stunts sometimes felt very shallow. You know, people are like, oh, you set yourself on fire, or you've seen this celebrity, and there's a moment of joy and experience there for them. But to me, it was never as long lasting as what I wanted. I always wanted to say, yes, and it's really easy to set yourself on fire if you do it the right way. There's a few rules. Here's what you have to do and overcome. Here's the safety you need, and everyone can do it. Okay, cool. Now what happens? You know, I'm not trying to tell everyone that they should set themselves on fire, but like, what's next now that you have that permission and that ability? Because a lot of people, you know, they look at travel as like, oh, that's something that other people do, and I can't travel because I don't have money or don't have this or don't have that. But to me, giving people permission and giving people an excitement to see the world differently, that's what's really magical. When I do public speaking, I sometimes speak at schools, and I talk about being a stunt performer because that's really cool. But then I want to transition quickly into when I'm working with middle schoolers, for example, talking about superheroes, because I think that's something everyone can relate to because they see it up on the screen. But then I always bring it back to them. It's like, okay, cool. What's your superhero power? And I start reframing language and saying that we all have superhero powers, and mine is not that I die, that I won't die if I get set on fire. It's just that I'm really smart and I love learning. And you guys are smart too, but what are you smart about? And so we reframe a lot of experiences they might have. And I love it when kids can say, you know, I just realized my superhero power is kindness. Or I just realized my superhero power is my ADD, that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of kids are still trying to figure out who they are. And they got people telling them, kind of like on social media, like we're talking about, you need to be more of this or less of this. But just give them permission to be who they are and step up into that. And they can have more congruence and resonance and authenticity in the world. Yeah. And also the same with coaching. When I'm working with adults as a public speaker, I'm trying to give them very simple tools to snap them out of themselves, because we all get stuck, I think, in our programs and get stuck on, again, I'm using social media. I'm beating up social media today, apparently, but we all get stuck in that program of keep scrolling, the doom scrolling, right? What if there's a way to catch ourselves out and say, I'm literally going to only be on here for 5 minutes. And when the alarm goes off, get the F off of it, because that's the trigger that cuts you off and that snaps that program in half, right? Sometimes things are more subtle, but sometimes those, I call them programs, they want to keep running. And I like working with people who have a desire to be more self-aware about the programs they all have, the subconscious actions, behaviors, beliefs, and can actually sit down with me as a coach or me as a public speaker and go, okay, what are we actually looking at here? I'm doing that thing again, aren't I? Yeah, you're doing that thing again. That's okay. And that's one of the things I try and teach people, is to say to themselves, I'm doing that thing again. You're not angry, you just have anger. And if you pull apart that anger, there's an action there. Are you trying to move toward the object or away from it, right? Are you thinking about what happened in the past that's making you angry, or are you thinking about something that's happened in the future? Because very few emotions come from the present moment. It's all about a perception, good or bad, past or future, right? And to be able to catch yourself, you just say, oh, I'm doing that thing again where I get angry at my mother or my father, or I feel unloved or something. It's like, okay, you have a program that is making you feel unloved. Let's pull that apart. And so to keep unpacking that, that's where the magic and the power can be, to be able to just catch ourselves and say, oh, hey, I nearly got on social media again, or I nearly snapped at that guy because I was going to run my anger program or whatever it might be. And so to me, that's the magic, is like when you can pull someone out of themselves and start becoming the programmer of their own life, rather than just constantly living subconsciously, getting beaten around in a storm. They're actually sailing their own course to their destination. Yeah.
It's so good.
It's so good. Yeah.
So rich. Yeah. We'll move into wrapping up the first half in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Just a reminder for the audience that this first half of my conversation with Brett, it will be going out as episode 20 of the Naturally Rosy podcast. It is publicly available. If you're enjoying this conversation I'm having with Brett, please like it, comment on it, share it. That helps other people who may also enjoy it and take something with it find it. That is how the social media works.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not enjoying it, please don't like it or share it. No pressure to share anything that you don't enjoy. And the next half of me and Brett's conversation will be available only to paid subscribers of the Naturally Rosy Substack. You can access it either by becoming a paid subscriber or by using your free 7-day trial, which will give you access to the second half of this conversation, episode 21, as well as all the other content behind the paywall, all the other second halves of conversations with guests, and paid subscriber only content, articles. Yeah. So I'm sitting with, as we're wrapping up this first half, and I care a lot about, especially the end of the first half of my conversations with guests, recognizing that this is the chance for everyone to hear you. Like, this is the remainder of the time for everyone to hear you, including the people who don't want to, aren't yet ready to pay money or click the free trial button, right? So that being said, it's special time to me. So you've already, and I love the practical tools. I love offering people practical tools that they can implement into their lives. I love breaking down self-awareness practice into that kind of minutia, especially because I feel like, at least a trend that I've seen over, from what I can see, thousands of years of human history, is that the people who had the awareness often didn't break it down into that minutia. Mm-hmm. That it was that the process of self-actualization, inner alchemy, etc., was kind of shrouded in this mystery, spiritual, out of touch language. You can figure it out if you try. It's like, that's not helpful. It is to a degree. It can be inspiring and intriguing, and for people who actually are like, no, I'm ready. Like, I want to do the work. Tell me, tell me what to do. What other tools would you offer to them? Anything?
Firstly, if there's people who are interested, I would love to offer a coaching session. If there's people out there who would like that, for the first 10 people who want to reach out to me from the Always Rosy podcast, I'd love to give them a free half-an-hour coaching session. Naturally Rosy. Dang it. Okay. I was like, I've got it. No. Yeah, I would love to give them a free half-an-hour session. That's my way of saying thank you for this conversation, because this helps me deepen my self-awareness, and I'd love to help other people do that. That magic of giving aha moments, that is super exciting to me, knowing that I actually keep a list of some of these things. When people say they give me a very specific acknowledgement of something that they've become more aware of, I keep that, because that's a beautiful currency that I want to keep very tightly for myself, Yeah. So the people who would like that, I'd be happy to. The other thing that just coming to me that I'd love to talk about, that's, I think, super valuable, and it's just a concept that I've sort of started becoming more conscious of recently. It's the concept of reverse pareidolia. And what that is, pareidolia is the idea where, you might see a face in a tree, or you say that cloud looks like a plane or something, and you're constantly looking for familiar patterns and shapes to recognize what's good and bad in your world. The challenge with that is, you are where you are right now. And if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. So to that extent as well, if you keep seeing what you've always seen, you're going to keep getting what you've always gotten and only be able to take action from that place, right? So you have to be able to see, and this is kind of to your point that you were just speaking about before, Rosie, is, people who are quote unquote ahead of us, and I hate that kind of term, but you know what I mean, right? The people who've walked the path ahead of us with money or sexuality, self-awareness, whatever it might be, they can point us the way, but until we can learn to see it for ourselves and take a chance and step into that, it's not really going to shift. And I think a lot of us, as we're growing, we kind of want other people to just tell me what to do, you know, but you have to walk that path yourself. You have to be willing to walk the path yourself, and you've got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. You can't just read it in a book. You can't just watch a movie. Movies and books are often triggering to us to make us do that work, but we shouldn't give all of the credit to the book. It's not the book that taught us. We saw something differently. And I think a beautiful book or a beautiful movie is one that you can keep watching again and again, like Siddhartha, or for me, like The Matrix, where you keep watching these movies every year and there's just such a rich mirror or empty cup that you can fill or reflect back to you, whatever you are in that moment. And then that magic keeps resetting itself and keeps triggering you. So my advice and my encouragement to others is to keep looking for those opportunities to step out of their comfort zone, whether it's just go to a new event, meet new people, talk to that person. It's going to suck. It's going to hurt because you're probably going to fail the first time. And that's okay. It's not about making the $1 million or closing the deal on that first conversation, but go back and say, okay, what could I have done differently? What did I do well? And to be able to step back from yourself and step back from the emotion that you might be having, that feeling of rejection or failure. Okay, what happened? And just sit with that and allow yourself to keep looking at it until an idea comes and say, cool, I'm going to change something. I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to go back out and do it again. And so I love to see people get out of their comfort zone and learn to be more comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I want to go more into other things? I'll just say this. I'm working on an article right now breaking down the fundamentals of inner alchemy, like what's required for the alchemical process. And one of the aspects is applying more heat, right? And how do we do that?
Yeah.
We do that through getting outside our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And what that allows for is for new materials to arise inside our cauldron or inside our being, namely new often uncomfortable emotions, especially at first. And there are things to learn there.
Yeah.
Then. We can't learn things inside our comfort zone. We already know it. We're used to it. It requires getting outside our comfort zone in order to actually have new ingredients and new materials to work with to expand our repertoire. And that doesn't mean that those ingredients are now the same ingredients we're going to use for forever.
Yeah.
Right? That I'll be feeling rejection and angst forever in my life. No, that's just part of the process as then those ingredients cook and simmer and marinate, and we learn, okay, what new awareness, ideas, perspective do I need to add to these ingredients in order to shift them into something that's closer to that thing that I want.
Yeah. And also I love the metaphor of adding the ingredients. I love that. And it's also the opposite, I think, is also true, where it's like, let's look at the ingredients that's already there and pull apart the rejection or pull apart the angst and keep breaking it up into component parts too, because again, you can go meta and you can step back, or you can go really detailed and zoom in. So I just love people who are willing to step into the work. As we go through life, our comfort zone in all of the areas in life is either closing in around us, and that pain of, well, I didn't maintain my car, so my car broke down. That's kind of what happens. But if we go and step forward and want to keep improving our car, we say, I'm going to maintain it every week. I'm going to do this every month, every quarter. I'm going to take for a PM, preventative maintenance. And we have to do that with ourselves as well. We have to keep going to our comfort zone and keep pushing it out and keeping that boundary from moving in on us by making it push back out again. Yeah.
So good. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett.
Thank you, Rosie,
for coming on. We'll be right back for whoever wants to join us for the second half of the conversation. Until next time, again, this is the Naturally Rosie podcast. I'm Rose. I've been here with Brett Solomano, and this is episode 20. So awesome.
Beautiful.
And then I'm practicing a closing, which is spend some time outside, keep laughing, and give someone, maybe yourself, a big hug today. All right.
Beautiful.